morning and welcome to this special meeting of the Cabinet. Have we any apologies?
Apologies here from Councillor Constable and from Mr Bourne and Mr Hayes, religious representatives.
And the order of business?
As published, Chair, a follow paper has been issued in respect of item number 4.
Any declarations of interest? If any come up, feel free to put them in, which then takes us to item 4, which is the follow paper, the Local Government Benchmarking Framework results. Kenneth.
Thank you, Leader. This report sets out the Local Government Benchmarking Framework results for 2013-14. The benchmarking framework covers 60 indicators, of which 58 are relevant to Midlothian. And on the first page, we set out the areas that these indicators cover. And in the introduction, we just talk a bit about the background to this, and indeed how Midlothian fares on the basis of the 2013-14 analysis and the 51 indicators which allow for some comparison. And what we've done in Appendix 1 is show the indicators in the top and bottom quartiles, and then there's a full breakdown of the Midlothian results in Appendix 2. Now, I guess there's some positives about this report. We've got more in the top quartile than in the bottom, and more in the top half than in the bottom half. But the differences are relatively marginal. And really, I think what is more interesting is to look a bit more at the background. And if you look at the indicators, and we haven't broken this down formally in the report, but you can broadly divide them into ones that relate to operational performance, those that relate to financial performance, and those that relate to customer satisfaction. And if you do that piece of further detailed looking at it, what you notice in terms of operational performance, a significant majority of our indicators are in the top half of the performance schedule. If you look at financial performance, it's a bit more mixed. And if you look at customer satisfaction, with the exception of the parks and open spaces measure, our customer satisfaction indicators do tend to be in the lower half. And I think there's some interesting questions that we need to perhaps follow up on in relation to that. I have to say I also have some concerns about inconsistency in data. If you look at the pattern of the results over the years, somewhere the differentials year on year seem very considerable, and I think that has to raise some questions for us about the reliability of the local financial returns, the LFRs, which are used by the improvement service to generate these results. And one thing I've said to the directors is we need to have a greater scrutiny of these at a draft stage. So if there are any issues in the data, we can resolve them before they're published on a national basis. And I do also think that if, as the Accounts Commission seem to think, the local government benchmarks are the best measures we have of local government performance, then I think that we need to be able to review on a national basis what indicators are in the national framework. If you look at the balance between, for example, the number of adult social care indicators and those that relate to road and waste, there's an awful lot more in the latter category. So I still think there's work to be done. It's an emergent framework even now in its fourth year. So whilst I think there's lots of useful data, I think we also need to just be aware of some of the limitations of what we have in front of us as well. Going on from that to Appendix 1, which talks about top and bottom quartiles. In terms of the ones in the top quartile, I've already mentioned that one about the percentage of satisfaction with parks and open spaces, which I think is very notable, where we've moved from 26th to 6th in 1 year. And I think that's very positive, but it's perhaps not easy to understand exactly how such a change has been achieved. In terms of performance, the most notable one is about positive destinations, and the big change there, the result of some excellent work across the Council. We need to ensure that we secure that significant improvement. I think it's perhaps also worth mentioning the sickness absence figures. You know, we express our dissatisfaction with sickness absence. The fact is, over most of the council, our position is good. In terms of teacher absence, the position is very good. And what we need to do is focus in on the relatively few areas where we know the performance isn't good enough. But overall, we're strong there. And the other one I'd mention is the percentage of council dwellings that meet the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. I mean, the fact that we lie second in Scotland is a result of what really has been a long-term commitment in Midlothian to improving the housing stock. And I think that's a really notable success. In terms of those in the bottom quartile, a number of these relate to satisfaction levels, satisfaction with social care and social work, satisfaction with local schools. I mean, these are interesting ones because, you know, in terms of adult social care, you know, we are seen as an authority which is, you know, at the leading edge of innovation and doing some very positive work, and yet the customer satisfaction isn't high. And I think we need to ask ourselves questions about, you know, how we are improving the customer experience and how we are also, you know, being positive and on the front foot about what our achievements are. Excuse me. I suppose the other point I'd make there, and it's a more general point, is in terms of adult social care, you know, one of the most important indicators from the public service point of view is delayed discharge, but that appears nowhere in the benchmarking frameworks. I think it's always historically been seen as a health indicator, but it's in fact the work of social work and social workers in terms of getting people out of the hospital environment into more suitable environments, which is fundamental, and yet that isn't something that appears amongst the benchmarks. In terms of, there's a couple of cost indicators there. I think the one in relation to home care costs, I'm concerned about the variability year on year, and I think we need to explore that in some more detail. In terms of, for example, the corporate and democratic core costs per 1,000 population, that's quite a limited measure, and it might be that as a small council, it's going to be difficult for us to have the kind of efficiencies which some of the larger councils have. In other areas, the percentage of income tax due in the year, I mean, this is an indicator which is relatively newly falling in under Kevin Anderson's responsibility, and I think he and I both, you know, agreed that this is something where the council has to get better, and that we'll focus efforts on improving that. And I think there's some positive early signs in relation to that already. So for each of these, and you'll see a lot of them do relate to cost or satisfaction, you know, the report sets out the proposed improvement actions, and we should be endeavouring to enhance our performance in relation to these. A lot of information in the report, Chair. Myself and my colleagues happy to take any comments or questions that members may have.
I think maybe just a general comment first before opening to members. Clearly, I mean, you said there's some of the data would maybe query, and that's fair enough, but at the same time there's a number of indicators, and almost half of them are in the bottom two quartiles. What actions are we going to take to address that fact and try to manage performance across all of these sectors, and while still maintaining the top performance at the top?
Well, I mean, in relation to those in the bottom quartile, the actions are set out at the end of Appendix 1, and I think that, you know, as I say, a lot of these relate to costs and public perception, so it is about increasing that focus on, you know, driving out efficiencies, and it is also about ensuring that, in the broadest sense, our customer service is good. I mean, you'll notice in the last one, you know, percentage of adults satisfied with refuse collection. You know, it talks about you know, improving the service. You know, the approach of frontline staff being courteous, ensuring that we're putting the bins back. You know, relatively small things might make quite a significant difference. As I said, I think in terms of indicators towards the bottom, which are pure measures of performance, such as the income due from council tax in a year, that clearly there needs to be a focus on that. It's understood by officers, and that work has been taken forward. And also, if you look at page F6, there we have one of the attainment measures. And whilst I think that in terms of positive destination and attainment, I'm confident we're doing some very good work in the council now on that. We've still got a long-term issue with attainment in our schools, and that remains a focus for us, and we need to continue to do that. And again, the comment supports that. So I think we do still need to focus. I think that the measures there are examples of how we need to take things forward. And we also need to identify examples of which I think, sorry to go back to this one again, on the council tax, where there's a few very clear examples where we need to focus on improved performance, and that's certainly one of them.
Given our performance seems to be particularly good in frontline operational matters, and its perception and customer satisfaction where we're lower, is that an indication that perhaps people have had a poor experience in the past and haven't necessarily seen the new improved impacts happening, and that's maybe shading their opinions?
That may be the case. I mean, I think it's very difficult to second guess the result of these. These are national surveys where results are produced for all councils, and the survey, the numbers in each council are relatively small. But I think, for example, the satisfaction with schools one. I mean, the quality of our school estate is exceptionally high. The efforts we're putting in to improve education are, very robust. The resources a council were putting in is significant. So I find it difficult to say why it is that we should be in the bottom quartile for satisfaction with schools. So I think we need to do some more, try and understand that position a bit better. I'm just going to, with your permission, Chair, bring in Evelyn. I think there's a comment to make.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm interested in this area because I know in social care, when we survey service users who are using services, we get a much higher rating than the ones where the general public is surveyed. So, but that's really, really important, because the general public out there who haven't used our services yet are the ones who will need them at some point. So it's really important that we are communicating much better and shifting historic perceptions as well. And the other one is in relation to, we commission a lot of voluntary sector, like Alzheimer's, vocal and independent sector, and often what will happen is service users will identify much more with them as the provider rather than the council who's done the commissioning, who's working in partnership with them. And in terms of the experience of the person who needs care, what's really, really important is they trust Alzheimer's, they trust those organisations. But there's something about it's not just the experience of people who use services is really, really important, and there's much we can do there. But there's something about how we communicate with the wider public that we want to do more work on.
Thanks, Chair. There's quite a lot in this report, and I'd like to highlight a couple of points. Appendix 1 on page 1, page F5, it says the percentage of council houses that are energy efficient, a figure of 99%. How was that measured? Because I find that incredible that we would have that amount of energy efficient homes.
Mr. Anderson may be able to help you on this.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of Councillor Bryant's question, I don't have the specific formula, but it is in relation to the type of heating system, the emissions, the carbon contribution in relation to that. So I can get the actual formula if that's of interest to you, but certainly relative to what the Chief was explaining earlier in terms of the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, there are different elements of that in terms of whether how different components of that, and energy efficiency is one of those, safety and security is another element, the general environment is another element again too, as well as the structure of the property itself. So there are different elements, energy efficiency is one of those, but as I say, the particular formula, I can have that provided to you, but there, because it does relate to the U values and elements that we're going to pick up later today in terms of the condensation impact within those properties, because they're better insulated, there's less ventilation as there were in windows that didn't fit properly, chimneys that were able to give a circulation of air inadvertently within a property. So we can give you the specifics and come back to you on that, but as I say, it's one component within the Housing Quality Standard, and because we are as well placed as we are in terms of the meeting the Housing Quality Standard, it reflects that in terms of the energy efficiency as well.
And the other point I just want to make is I was at a public meeting last Thursday when the subject of the new houses at Salters Road came up, and apparently it's all people from Niddrie. Now, how do these rumours get started? How do we deal with them?
I think you remember you hit the nail on the head there, Jim. It's rumours.
Certainly, I was present at that meeting with Councillor Bryan and able to indicate to the complainant that certainly the reality is somewhat different, that whilst people are able to come into Midlothian from other areas, that's on the basis of a local connection, either a current or a previous local connection, and it's predominantly, we find, in terms of the need to provide or receive support from family networks, or again in terms of other caregivers there. And as we were able to indicate during the course of that meeting, it's not the case that we are importing people from outside on the homeless basis, as was being alleged, because we had 3 people who were accepted in that category last year, because I had a similar question from another elected member in that regard. So we were able to bust that myth, because that's precisely what it is. But there is an entitlement and eligibility for people who have a local connection to Midlothian, albeit they reside out with Midlothian, to be eligible for consideration in our housing allocation policy.
Any other questions, comments from members?
Yeah, just a couple on the thing. Generally, most of the things, certainly in my portfolio, seem to be really positive things. Like it's good to see on the parks and the open spaces, which I think is one that we are working well on, and a lot of work's been done on that. And the fact that we are now working towards improving a lot of our buildings in that. And I think what we have seen is that there's been years of neglect in a lot of these buildings. And to be honest, when I saw the state of Stob Hill, when I went up there first, it's amazing what we're asking our staff, conditions we're asking our staff to work in. And that's, I think, throughout the council estate. But it's good to see work is now progressing. The work going on here at Midlothian House and it's going on at Fairfield House, and that we're hopefully now moving to improve Stob Hill, give them a super depot up there, and hopefully the future's looking a bit better, I think, for our building estate. But I think that just highlights and the work that we're putting in now in the schools and building the new schools and progressing that, I think, is a positive for this council.
Okay, I take it the progress in improving the measures will filter through future reports.
Yes, I mean, a number of these feature in the quarterly performance reports. Some of them do. And I hope that, I mean, it's the balance between the quarterly reports and the additional information that comes forward through the benchmarks provides a reasonably good overview of progress. But as I say, I do think that, on a wider Scottish basis, there is a need to ensure that this set of indicators is as appropriate as it can be and as consistently measured as it can be.
Okay, with that, happy to accept the recommendation. Thank you. Takes us then to item 5A, the quarterly performance report from Midlothian Council.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief in my introduction to this. The report's in the standard format that you're used to, an introduction setting out the priorities and the Single Midlothian Plan themes, and then an update under each of these themes, which I think broadly shows a lot of positive progress in most areas, including it sets out some of the big issues that we're working on in health and social care, in getting it right for every child in terms of the new legislation that's come through in our response to that. And I think some of the very innovative work we're doing in that area. And of course, next week we'll find out whether we've been successful in achieving a COSLA Gold Award for the big bedtime read. We're a finalist in that category. And it also talks, I think importantly, in the context of our previous item, about the work being done in terms of attainment and achievement. And I think that remains a very important focus. In terms of the sustainable growth section, it touches on some of the work being done to promote economic development. I think that, as I've said before to members, this is an exceptionally important aspect for the Council, partly because this year the opening of the railways and the fact that the development of new infrastructure always drives investment, and it's absolutely incumbent on the Council to take full advantage of that, and to ensure that that results in new opportunities, new employment for some of those in our more deprived communities. That'll be a big focus for the current year. As ever, the report also sets out the challenges. I think in terms of the financial challenge, that does remain very significant if we look forward beyond 17-18 to our current best estimates of the kind of budget gaps that we will be facing. Also talks about funding pressures in particular service areas, integration, the challenge of new legislation and change. In terms of the indicators at the end of the report, a slight drift which I'm concerned to see in terms of the invoice payment otherwise matters largely on target, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Any questions from members on the overall report?
Yeah. Overall, certainly I can only speak from my own in the commercial operations part. Most of it is quite good. It's a lot of good new stuff in there. The awards, the cycling awards, and the ones on the 4,000 volunteers and that. And I think a lot of there is quite good stuff in there. The vehicle charging. Can I maybe ask on where we're at with the chemical incident at Stop Hill? Any action plans there, or there was
in terms of the chemical incident, which members will recall happened last year when there was a substance transferred from Pennycook to Stop Hill and resulted in being an unknown substance initially. There was a full lockdown of the depot involving all the emergency services. A number of our staff were treated by Scottish Ambulance Services. On the back of that, I insisted on having a formal debrief. That took place after it, and there's a number of action plans in place which are progressing.
Okay, members happy with the overall report? I mean, obviously pick up the other areas as we go through. Yeah. Okay, note that report. Takes us to 5B1, Health and Social Care and Customer Housing Services. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of quarter 3, the library services through customer services have been undertaking a number of events in relation to the First World War commemorations. We had the Scottish Government visit in terms of Welfare Reform Resilience Fund. This is the project at Gorebridge Library, which launched in January of this year, and we'll be reporting that back in due course at the end of that project, probably around May. The library service, in terms of some of the discussion about channel shift that we've had previously, has noted a decrease in terms of physical contacts of about 33%, but I would note that in terms of virtual figures, the e-services has increased by the same amount. So certainly our early work in terms of channel shift, both in revenues and libraries, is showing progress there. The contact centre, the customer service profiling work, which was referenced in Council the other week, has certainly been completed, giving us that baseline information to better inform the mapping of services and how people contact us and the characteristics there, in order that we can focus the correct shifting of channels to deliver services and meet customer expectations and indeed customer satisfaction, as has been referenced earlier. So there's more work to do in terms of those two elements. In homelessness, we've seen a reduction in homeless presentations. That certainly reflects the work that's gone on in terms of prevention through youth agencies and schools, when 25% of our presentations largely come from those aged under 25. Whilst those presentations are decreasing, the number of people who are placed in temporary accommodation, that's increased relative to the moving on options, which have had restrictions in respect of welfare reform, and the plans that we've had in terms of the reuse of Pentland House and Midfield House for temporary accommodation are progressing through following Cabinet and Council approval at the year end. In terms of challenges, as is indicated, New Myers Crescent, we continue to work on relocation of residents there following the decision last June for demolition. We are at the end of last week down to 15 households from the original 64, looking across the whole range of housing options from the Council's own stock, those of partners in housing associations, and indeed the potential for the new build at Greenhall, and new buyers essentially are progressing through in consultation with those residents with the option to return to either of those locations. In terms of revenues, as has been referenced earlier, there's been a challenge in the past year, and that was the case in the last quarter. Relative to council tax, we've seen an improvement in performance, where we are 0.5% up in the year to date from where we were last year. And in January, there was just a spot check on collection rates for council tax carried out by the Institute of Ratings and Revenues, and of 29 authorities that responded, 14 have improved their position, which includes ourselves, and 11 have deteriorated, and 4 have stayed the same. And clearly at the financial year end, we'll be reporting our final position there. In terms of welfare reform, universal credit has been announced that Midlothian is in tranche 1 in the new financial year, with a commencement date of the 27th of April, and there's a separate paper to Cabinet later this morning in that regard. For community safety, the focus in recent months has been on the new psychoactive substances. Again, there was reference at last council in relation to this problem, and analytical profile was produced in partnership through the community safety partnership with police and third sector services, with a dedicated group led by MELDAP, which has been established to progress action and the support required, again from a mapping exercise being carried out in Midlothian. And I'll pause there for any questions, Chair.
I did want to pick up particularly on page 23, Kevin, the relet timescales for mainstream housing. Obviously there's been the impact there from new buyers on Gore Avenue, but are we likely to see improvements in that soon?
Certainly, yes. Clearly, we're reflecting in Q3, but I can report in Q4 there has been an improvement in actual performance, and you're right, certainly the impact has been in order that we could prioritise relocation of new buyers' residents there.
Any other questions, comments? I'm happy to note. Thank you. Item 5B2 is adult and social care.
Thank you, Chair. The first paragraph highlights areas of development. We're making good progress in relation to integration. Particularly, I suppose what's particularly pertinent is not just the mechanics of integration, but also the work we're doing around transformation and reshaping services for older people. A very extensive process of engagement with local stakeholders, with staff, on how we can do things differently by working differently and working in more joined up ways with health colleagues. And that process is ongoing with the goal of having a strategic plan that will be signed off in June when the partnership will go live. In relation to older people, we've completed re-tendering exercise for a care at home services, and new providers should be in place by the 1st of April. We're doing well in relation to now delayed discharge targets. The new target that it comes in April, where we've now achieved it in the last 2 months. That's 0 delays over 2 weeks at census time. But we're also, the other area that's particularly important for us is avoiding emergency hospital admissions, and we've now got our hospital at home service fully up and running, and it's starting to make a real impact on that area, which is particularly important for frail and vulnerable older people. What we're doing is avoiding a hospital admission wherever we can. Self-directed support is ongoing, and we're a lot of staff training and development, working with carers to roll that one out. We've been successful in a bid for additional money for looking at the needs of people who are living with cancer. What we're focusing increasingly on in the delivery of health services is not just the process of diagnosis and treatment, but it's also how well people live with these long-term conditions, and we're looking at doing some work around lifestyle choices and supporting people with cancer in the community. And again, that continues across a whole range of other long-term conditions. Criminal Justice Spring Service for Women Offenders is up and running. We're seeing good partnership there across a whole range of staff from different sectors, really focusing in a very with women who are probably some of the most vulnerable women in our communities, who are involved in offending, many of whom have substance misuse issues as well. And the model of service that we are using is one that makes a real difference, rather than some previous interventions that we've seen from the statutory services. Again, doing work with people with learning disabilities around keeping people safe in relation to the use of the internet. Again, although it brings many benefits, it brings huge threats for people who are vulnerable. And we're working on the launch of the sensory impairment strategy. In terms of our pressures, continuing concerns about funding, although we have had, we've made a submission for the Integrated Care Fund, and we're just waiting confirmation of that, and that's important in terms of not just replacing the change fund, but also increasing the money that we've had available. There's also been an announcement of an allocation of more money for delayed discharge, but with that comes a challenge to move to getting people discharged within 72 hours. And 72 hours is a point at which it's maximum benefit to get people out in that period. So that's a huge challenge ahead. The other pressure comes from our care home and sickness absence, but members will be aware of the work that's going on there, and week on week we are seeing a reduction in levels of sickness absence, and there's a major piece of work going on in New Bars in particular. I'm receiving the outcome report of that this week, and we will immediately, there are a number of measures already in place, but more actions will follow that in relation to addressing the underlying causes. Key going forward is not just budget, but also quality, and the quality of our workforce, the available of suitably skilled and qualified workforce, and we're starting work on that. And it's about looking at the totality of the workforce within council, within health, but also really, really importantly in the voluntary and the independent sector as well, to make sure that we have the quantum and quality of staff out there that we need to develop to deliver those very personalised services that's required. In relation to indicators, some of the key ones to draw members' attention to ones is in relation to complaints. We've had a dip in complaints in the last quarter. That was primarily due to, there was technical problems in relation to what was happening with the system, but we also had management changes as well that we're bedding in. But it's an area that we're aware of and we're addressing. And similarly, in relation to budget, we're looking at a more positive outturn than was originally forecast in this quarter. I'll pause there and happy to respond to questions.
Just a couple of things. The spring service for women offenders, and I do know that it's doing really well, but now that East Lothian have pulled out, I just would like some assurance that the service will continue.
Absolutely. The service was set up originally, it's a one-day-a-week service, and it was set up originally shared with East Lothian. It involved transporting women to a venue either in Mid Lothian or in East Lothian. Colleagues in East Lothian will find it difficult to provide the staffing to staff, in terms of their commitment to the service, but the continuation of the service, we're committed to ensuring that it continues. It's of significant benefit to the women who are attending, and it's another example of where, rather than having lots of different people involved in people's lives, providing an intensive input can really make that difference. We are using the Arts Centre at the moment, and I think we're really looking for a bit of a cosier, for the want of a better word, environment, or a more homely environment to deliver the service in. So we'll continue to work on that. But it's, in terms of its staffing, we're drawing staff from right across our services.
Thank you very much. And then originally I had concerns about going from a 2-week delay to working towards less than 2 weeks for a delayed discharge, but now going down to 72 hours, and I'm looking for assurance that it will be appropriate and we won't be sending people home before they're ready.
Yes, I mean it's an interesting issue, because it's not just about getting people home quickly. It's making sure the whole of the journey is right and we have the right support for them when they do get home. What we are doing is trying to start a bit further up and stop people going in. I mean, I talked about our hospital at home service, and that's where people who previously would have had to go into hospital, we're now looking at how far we can go in terms of treating people at home, and we've got advanced practitioner nurses and a geriatrician along with care staff delivering that service. So that's about the prevention in the first place and keeping people at home and stable, because we know that going into hospital destabilises people's support systems. The other one that we're looking at and I've started doing is what we call discharge to assess, and that is rather than decisions being made in a hospital environment about what people's needs are, instead we're looking at getting people home and making that assessment in people's home environment. And well, there's good evidence that if you do that assessment in people's home environment, it'll be a better assessment, because you're assessing people in the environment that they're going to be living in. So we've started that process, and we're hoping that'll make an impact as well. In terms of making sure that people aren't going home too early and getting it right, it's really about good joined-up working and decision-making within the hospital. Our InReach team has been going now for several years. It's very well regarded by our acute colleagues. So it's getting that decision-making around each individual right in the hospital, and we're working hard on that.
With that, members happy to note the report. Thank you. Takes us to 5C3, Children's Services.
Thank you. Children's Services, we're working towards the implementation of the Children and Young Persons Act. So as you're aware, there are various stages to that are coming in at various times, but we're on track to deliver all of the areas within our remit. The Public Protection Committee or the Public Protection, it's not committee, Public Protection Unit in Dalkeith is becoming more, that word threw me, the Public Protection Unit in Musselburgh is becoming more established. We've got commitment from Police Scotland to join the Public Protection team, so when they're doing the IRDs, all of the staff will be together, health, social work and police, and that helps move things forward. Family Resilience Project has been running for 18 months, and we just had a meeting last week about the independent review, and what it has shown is that this is a very positive way of working and has had good outcomes for the children and families involved. We had a positive inspection in residential services, and we work with the Dalkeith House in a different way. So rather than bringing children into a residential unit and the 4 beds they're taking up, we work with the children and their families together, and over the last 9 months we've worked with 45 young people, and it's keeping these young people at home but working with their parents around how do we keep the children safe, keep the young people safe. Self-directed support, again, that's part of the Act, and it's been rolled out in both adult and children's services, and that is going well. Again, it's ongoing evaluation about how we move forward with that, and it's about parents choosing the resource or the service or an approach to suit them as opposed to suit the services. Again, the integration of health and social care of children's services, we're working towards that, and although I think Evelyn pointed out that there's a report going to Council, and although children's services won't be in this report at this stage, we're still working on that journey, so working together. It's not going to be a big bang at the end of a period, it's that we are working together. We're continuing with the Children's Services Review, and we're looking to be together in one building, and I think that that really would help us focus on the areas of greatest need. Our child protection figures, they've gone from a high of 93 in April 14 to 33 in December, which sounds really good, and they're doing a lot of really good work. However, in that period, in terms of resourcing, there were 420 IRDs during that period, and that's where we have to investigate to say whether something is a child protection issue. So although our numbers on the child protection register are low, we need to bear in mind that the number of interventions, 420, and then in terms of social work referrals, 933 in that period. So the resources are still being used, but it's about at a much lower level. In terms of emerging risks and challenges, the unplanned youngsters coming into care is our biggest challenge, and as you know, we've had a number of youngsters gone into secure care, which was unplanned. So we're reviewing these cases to find out were there points that we could have intervened earlier. You know, was there something that could have been done? That's that one. And the implementation of the named person by 2016. Again, there's big challenges around this, but again, we're working with all the relevant agencies across this so that we're ready for implementation next year. We've managed to get a member of staff appointed. It was about 8 months we took to recruit someone to that post. However, we've got them in post now and they're working away, and that's good. And in sickness absence, again, just we'll have a number of service areas that there is a problem with sickness absence, long-term sickness. So just to be aware of that, that does impact on our children and families. In terms of off targets, that only we have a couple of complaints targets that are off target, but because of the complexity of the cases, you can ask for further time. And the only other area I would draw your attention to is the performance indicators that are off target, and these are around child protection. And just to reassure elected members, there were 9 initial case conferences, 7 were on time. We'll have to do it within the 21 days. 7 were on time, and 2 were out by 1 day. So instead of 21 days, there were 22 days. And that's so that we can get the right people round the table. There's no point in bringing people round the table if the parents aren't going to be there, or the health visitor's not going to be there, or the teacher's not going to be there. So it's just to reassure you. And then in terms of the reviews, we had 16 reviews within the period, 13 were on time, 1 was delayed so that a parent could attend, and 2 were delayed because the parents selfishly delayed the birth of the child. So the pre-birth case conference, there's an estimated delivery date, and then you would have to have the review within 3 months. However, the babies were late. So I just want to reassure you that although these are showing that we're off target, that's the reasons. And I can answer any questions.
It's not really absolutely connected with here, but today I heard on the news about the Oxford situation, that young people were being exploited, and we've all heard about Rotherham and NPS issues. I just want to make sure, or have some assurance, that we're working on all that to make sure that we're not going to be dragged down by all these awful issues.
Okay, NPS is a problem in Midlothian, both for adults and children. But again, we're working towards that. In terms of children's exploitation, there is a national forum looking at that. There was a summit last week, and our staff were represented there. There's also a group that's looking at that at the moment. So, you know, in addition to child protection, we're looking at child exploitation. We always say we're only one phone call away from something like this happening. But, you know, as long as staff are aware of all of this that's coming on board, as long as they're aware of their responses and responsibilities in relation to this, then, you know, we're up there. But I'm not saying that we're never going to get a phone call that says, here's something that's happened.
With that, we're happy to accept the report. Thank you. It takes us to 5C2, communities and economy.
Okay, I'm going to fly solo on this one just now, and if I need any support from Ian, I'm aware that I do education and I do children's services, but I just thought let's try my other part of my portfolio. Okay, so promoting economic development. There's a ballot date set for the Pennycook Business Improvement District, and that's in May. The Borders Railway Blueprint and Action Plan has been launched, and that was in November. The Draft Leader Business Plan and Local Development Strategy has been submitted to the Scottish Government, and we have completed the Business Gateway Catalyst Growth Phase 1. There's been successful community planning partnership annual away day, that was in November, and 4 new grants have been awarded for the Gorebridge Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme. Building standards, they were reviewed externally and they received a Customer Excellence Award with enhanced levels of performance. So it wasn't just at the initial level, it was at the enhanced level. And we've had approval by the Council of the Midlothian Development Proposed Plan for publication in spring. So the emerging challenges, Ian has a big remit within his portfolio. So the promoting economic development, so we've got a focus on implementing the ambitious Midlothian plan and taking forward opportunities to make progress across a wide front of activities, and Borders Rail. So Borders Rail is coming in September, and we want to make as much use of that as possible and boosting our key sectors. We're targeting infrastructure such as the Bush estate. We want to expand that much further and developing new roles for town centres, including the business improvement districts in Pennycook and other areas, and linking economic growth and job creation. Completing the review of the pilot partnership arrangements with East Lothian, so the joint the sharing of environmental health and trading standards. We've discussed that last week. We did put a report to both authorities about that and what it would actually mean for Midlothian. Maintaining progress on statutory stages in preparation of the Midlothian Development Plan. Maintain, where possible, improve on performance on the delivery of planning and development and building standards, and complete the implementation of the neighbourhood planning and establish new arrangements for monitoring and reporting. And that's a sentence there, but that is the big thing that will help improve what you were talking about earlier on. You know, how do we ensure that the reports that go to the Scottish Government are accurate? How do we ensure that the reports that you get as elected members? And that's the big piece in this jigsaw that we really have to work hard on. In terms of indicators that are off target, there are a number of indicators off target within this report, and we can provide more explanation for them if required.
Thanks for that, Mary. With my communities and economy hat on, I'm very pleased with Ian and his team and all the work they've been doing recently, particularly in view of LEADER, which has been a wee bit of a problem, but it's been handled very well now. And the things that are off target in here are quite minor, so I'm absolutely delighted the way things are going.
Can I just pick up a couple? On page 70, revised child poverty action plan. Obviously accept staff and restructuring issues, but how soon can we see that getting back on track?
We've just appointed, and someone has just started in the role of Senior Communities Officer, someone I've got a lot of confidence in, who I think is going to do a good job. And one of his first tasks will be to pick up on the fact there's a lag here and being a delay. So we now have in place the right person to take that forward.
Yeah, certainly that's one I'm very keen to see moving forward. And the other one I picked out was on 73. I suppose maybe it's, I don't know, it's just maybe particularly due to current circumstance, but it carried out a feasibility study on the no cold calling zones. Who would be covered by a no cold calling zone?
To some extent, that would be probably a discussion with our community planning partners, particularly the police, to look at those areas where, residential areas obviously, where there perhaps is a higher risk that individuals may be pestered or people may be pestered who wouldn't necessarily know how to deal with the issues of somebody just appearing on the doorstep. So to some extent, it's a process of consultation with our partners on that. I mean, one of the reasons why it's not come forward more readily is because very small teams have been dealing with the NPS side of things. But you know, in terms of the note there, it explains just where we are presently with
that. A resident contacted me because they were not in the best of health, and they got a phone call from a company saying, or led the person to believe the council had given them the details that they could buy equipment for their home that would help them in their illness. But when the person came, they were very vague about the agency who informed them, and the person was subject to a bit of financial harm. But Stephen Thompson in Trading Standards, I got in contact with him, and he was excellent, and he's alerted all the other local authorities in Scotland to this thing. And we had lots of paperwork that the salesperson had left, so I provided all that, and it was really good to see how quickly they were working and the help they offered. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, there's one thing I wanted to mention I forgot, was when Mary mentioned the bids in Pennycook, which is going well. There's also going to be a bids in the Bush, and we're hoping that we'll get one in Dalkeith as well.
Okay, with that, we're happy to note the report. Thank you, which takes us then to 5C3, education.
The implementation of the 600 hours early learning and childcare remains a real priority, and the early learning, the duty to provide the early learning and childcare for 2-year-olds commenced in October. To date, 72 children have taken this up. So in the report it says 41 families, but as today, 72 children have taken this up, so that's good. We're featuring in the Big Bedtime Read at the COSLA Awards next week, And the film highlighted excellent practice in Midlothian about how we encourage parents to read to their children and the benefits that has. It's not just about reading at bedtime, it's about a sleep routine, it's about mothers feeling more in control. There's a great DVD, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but you need to see it, it's absolutely excellent. And next week at the COSLA Awards, 2 of our parents are actually going to be there and they are going to deliver on it, which is excellent. So it's not about officers and things like that, it's about the parents who really feel it's made a difference. An early years vision has been developed, and the Council will take this forward in consultation, and we're trying to be more focused in how we support our children and families, especially in our areas of priority. Raising attainment, it's a key priority for the Council. The staff are working really hard. They've set up a new group looking at this and looking at curriculum learning and teaching, career-long professional learning strategy for teachers, improvement strategy group, and an ASN GIRFEC steering group. GIRFEC, getting it right for every child, ASN additional support needs. So again, really honing in on the areas that we need to look at. And of course you realise that Peter McNaughton will be leaving shortly, and we'll have Grace, the new head of service, in, and we're trying to have a transition period. But these groups are being led, instead of these groups being led by the centre, they're being led by head teachers. So it's about that devolved leadership, and it's not just about the centre telling people what to do. Of course, positive destinations, you know that a really good report. We're up to 93.9, and that was over 5% increase. The problem with that is now we've got to keep that up, and at the moment we're looking at the Christmas leavers and young people without posts at the moment. So we're working really hard on that. We've appointed a new officer there, Heather Fleming, so she's working very closely with all of the agencies to improve positive destinations. The emerging challenges, best start in life. East and Midlothian, we worked together as working on the Early Years Collaborative. It was of a time when Don Ledingham was here as Joint Director, and it was led by the Head of Service in East Lothian. And what we found was that both authorities weren't really getting the benefit of this. We've now actually discussed this, and we're now working in our own way. So Midlothian leads on Midlothian, East Lothian leads on East Lothian, and any learning that can be shared across, we will do that. Despite the many good things in place, the challenge remains of ensuring we make a consistent and tangible difference to raising attainment. That is the big issue nationally. The Scottish Government announced last week 7 areas sharing 100 million. Unfortunately, Midlothian wasn't one of them, but it's about how we, within the authority, keep that as one of our main priority areas. In terms of indicators of summary, school attendance, where we didn't meet the targets, but in actual fact, we're above the Scottish average in primary figures, and in secondary figures we're 90.9 against a Scottish figure of 91.1. So in actual fact, we've set ourselves very high targets for these, and it's important that we set ourselves ambitious targets, but we're off target for ourselves as opposed to really being off target for the Scottish Government. So on page 14, secondary attendance, we're off target very slightly. In primary attendance, we're 94.8, and we set ourselves a target of 95.5. In special provision, we're 93.6, and we set ourselves a target of 96%. So it's really just to say that we're off target against targets we set ourselves.
Clearly a lot of good work happening, and yeah, I think it is important that we maintain progress on positive destinations. I know Councillor Bryant says he wants us to be #1, so no pressure. But yeah, I think we do need to keep an eye on attainment as well, because I think we've seen from the benchmarking data and this info coming through that it continues to be a challenge for us to make the improvements I think that we would all want to see in that area.
Yeah, Mary, the positive destinations are really good. What's letting us down is children going on to higher education. Have you got a special plan for that, or?
We discussed that at can't remember, was it council or whatever. But what we need to do is raise aspirations for our children in Midlothian. So if we start at the early stage, the work we're doing in early years, the big bedtime read, all of that, contributes to raising aspirations. Raising the parents don't put the child into nursery just for the sake of getting 2 hours peace and quiet, or 3 hours and 10 minutes as it is now, peace and quiet. It's about children learning at that very early stage. Then they come to primary school, and we're working with Queen Margaret University, doing the Children's University. So the Dalkeith Associated School Group, they're working together, sort of raising aspirations again. So youngsters do challenges, like reading or brownies, or sport, whatever the youngsters are good at, and then they can graduate once they get enough points from Queen Margaret University. So they go through all of that. So again, it's about raising aspirations. And then it's about the work we do with our youngsters. We've got the LEAP programme, and that encourages our youngsters from Newbattle and schools that generally don't have high numbers going to university. So we've got that. There's also the bit about youngsters leaving Midlothian and going to university and not managing that transition. And again, our work that we're doing with our extended work with colleges, I can't remember what it's called now, it's went out of my head, but the college transactions that we're doing with youngsters in 4th, 5th and 6th year. So they go to college, they do an HND, and that will get them into 2nd year at university. So it's bridging that gap between school and university. So there's a lot going on, but it's just trying to improve young people's aspirations.
We talk a lot about improving the aspirations of the children, but what are we doing to help parents support their children's aspirations, or even in fact raising the parents' aspirations?
Again, we spoke about our early years and having early years approaches as opposed to centres. What we're talking about is how do we engage with parents around their children's learning, their learning, how do we encourage parents to get back to work. So again, having really good childcare allows parents to get back. I always give the anecdote, which is a true story, when I was a community education worker, and we had a creche worker training course. 24 parents attended the creche worker training course, and at the end of that course we had 1 creche worker. So what would people think? We've failed? Is that what people think? We've only got 1 creche worker out that course? No. These parents actually went on, they thought, well, actually I can do this. So if we'd called it a parenting course, we might have got 4 parents at it. But the fact that we called it a creche worker training course, which would allow parents to seek work with us or with nurseries or whatever, and they went on to get work. So it's about how we raise aspirations across the board, and that's what we're doing with our CLD colleagues. It's what we do with schools. It's how we engage parents in that journey.
I have one more question. I think the bedtime read and establishing routines is absolutely fabulous, and that's really good. But there are a lot of parents who have dyslexia and things and can't read, and these parents are getting a bit stressed out because they're not reading stories. What's been done to help these parents tell stories?
Telling stories isn't just about reading. Telling stories is about how you live your life. Telling stories is about, so what did we do today? So, the big bedtime read is a hook to get parents in. And there are other ways that we get parents in to primary schools and to nurseries and whatnot. So we have a number of youngsters with speech and language difficulties and all the rest of it, but the whole point is it's that nurturing. So we're working with parents about how you nurture children, and big bedtime reach is one way of doing that. You know, some parents think if you give your children a DVD at night and they're lying in bed watching a DVD, well, that isn't good for them. It overstimulates the child. So it's really how we nurture children. And, you know, if I had £1 for every time it was a parenting course, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be in the Caribbean islands somewhere enjoying the sun. But it's about how we value parents at where their starting point is, whether they're dyslexic, whether they've been drug using, whether they've got mental health issues, you know, whether they're the best parents in the world. It's about how we value parents and nurture that, you know, enjoyment of learning for their children, not just reading, but play, dance, music, everything.
Okay, thank you. Happy to note the report. Okay, that then takes us to item 5D1, commercial operations. John.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to take a leaf out Mary's book and fly solo. I'm also hoping to fly fast. In terms of this report, it's the third quarter end of December 2014. A number of the items within each of the three services are very much work in progress, so it's my intention to focus on the highlights and allow time for any clarifications members may have. Firstly, in terms of operation, it's quite right again, I raised the issue of the FCC contract for residual waste, 10-year in gestation, actually approved by Council in December, and one of the biggest contracts let in the Lothians area, which I'm personally immensely proud of the team. Within land and countryside services, as part of the insourcing work, we've secured the work against the private sector at Dalkeith Schools campus for 5 years, about £80,000 a year, and we're also undertaking work for Melville Homes on a contractual basis. In terms of the challenges, we've already heard that regarding the Borders rail line. We're supporting Ian Johnston and colleagues who are leading on the economic development thing. But in terms of the Borders rail opening early September, it's a massive logistical exercise. We've set up a safety advisory group and we're working with all partners to support this historic event for Midlothian. I'll pause there, Chair.
Apologies for jumping in earlier. But no, I think it's the fact that there is a lot of good stuff here, and I think we've really got to highlight the positives on the waste centre. That's going to be a huge for Midlothian, and even just looking at things like we're doing in Pennycook, and that's going to move ahead, and that's going to be, I think, a big improvement to the recycling centre at Pennycook. The other ones where I think we've got to also say that on the cycling awards for the schools, the one that I certainly did give an award up at St Luke's, but there's also the campus in St David's. I think that's what we're doing in schools, working with them, encouraging the cycling to school, and we're making it a lot easier with the path structure that we're trying to put in place. So I think that's really impressive work that's going ahead. The Ranger service, I think, they do excellent work, and the fact that we can get 4,000 volunteers in Midlothian, I mean, and that's the way we've got to go. We've got to encourage more of the community to get involved and work with us in what we're trying to achieve. So I think that's a very positive thing. And as I say, we're working on this, and the Borders rail, it's now we're moving towards, and I think there's a lot of good things happening in that we're now looking at, that I think we should be looking at in Midlothian to make the benefits of this. And that's in the cycling, the walking and the tourism aspect of it. But no, I think there's a lot there. The other things in the report, there's obviously some bits were off target, but I think that's mentioned there, that the restructuring of the management centres sort of on a bit hasn't helped with that, but hopefully Q4 that'll be sorted out and we're ahead. But I'm quite aware in this area of commercial operations, a lot of people, some of the complaints are, you know, they're a bit if you don't know, shouldn't, but people have very high expectations of what we can do, so that doesn't help. But can I just mention that coming across here today, the fact that once again you hear reports on the radio about other areas suffering, you know, roads closed, and some of them not too far from here. You know, Glenrothes, I think, has sort of trouble in Fife and all that, and yet I came all the way here in Black Roads, and I know it wasn't the highest falls, but that's not the first time. So I think, you know, the service we give when the weather conditions, it's got to be recognised.
There was one, it jumped out at me on page 115, reduction of death and injury on Midlothian's roads, and we're off target for that. And I know it's not a huge amount by we're off target, but I just wondered, is there work on way to make our target?
Yep, in terms of the sub-performance indicator there, it's the footpath network resurface, so there is work actually going on. A couple of examples, there's a road at the college going down from S-Bank Toll, so there's a number of works where we're resurfacing footpaths to try and hit the target.
Was that happy to note? Takes us then on to 5D2, Finance and Integrated Service Support.
Yep. Chair, with your indulgence, I'll be quite brief here because at the last council meeting I came off the bench and stood in for the Chief Finance Officer, so a lot of the issues in Gary's area were covered. But there's a couple I would like to draw Council Cabinet's attention to. We've already heard from colleagues about positive destinations. Within resources, we have a significant number of trainee, apprenticeship, young people jobs, and we also took part in the recent careers fair at Newbattle High School, which was in one of our focus communities. I went along the Thursday evening, and I've got to say the support from other organisations in most parts of the school was absolute first class, and it's an opportunity to work with colleague directors to give our young people the chance, and also the same chance that I personally had. Also, the purchase to pay project, you'll see in this later part of the report, is slightly behind schedule, but that will demonstrate and bring forward massive benefits in the efficiency of procuring goods and services. In terms of the emerging challenges, the key one I wish to draw Cabinet's attention to is the maintenance of financial discipline across all services. Particularly in my own division, I'm pretty much on top of that where possible, partly given my background, but also, more importantly, recognising the financial challenges facing the Council, and there has been some robust management over the last few years with regard to our finances. Again, Chair, I'll pause there for any points members may have.
John, could I look at page 129, the implementation of the Total Document Management Project? It seems to be slipping a bit. Will that get itself back on track by year end?
It won't be fully back on track by year end, I'll be honest, but the size and the scope of that project is significant, and during the currency of 15-16, part of our project is to move towards electronic minutes, electronic agendas. And one of my frustrations, and you've heard me in here, you've heard me in private session, is about document management and document control. So as part of the total document management, it will improve going throughout the year. And it also complements the EWIM strategy of less paper, more efficient use of technology.
Are councillors to be included in that?
Yes, I think it's incumbent on all councillors and all senior officers, which is ironic looking round my area at the moment. I think we should all be embracing modern technology where appropriate, and also just to modernise the place and make it more efficiently. So I'd be pushing it from the top, and I'm personally going to give a commitment in 15-16 to do it.
We'll hold you to that. I think with that, can we note the report? Okay, that takes us then to 5D3, Property and Facilities Management.
Yep, thanks again, Chair. A couple of points worth bringing to Cabinet's attention. The work's ongoing in Midlothian House in terms of the EWIM strategy, and on the first floor you see the difference daily. Then we move on to the second floor, then we bring people into Dalkeith. That will make a massive difference to our utilisation of the council estate. And in terms of emerging challenges, the primary 1 to 3 free school meals, it's not actually a challenge, because reading on Saturday's Scotsman, and I quote, Midlothian had the highest uptake with 87% of eligible children now taking school meals. In nearby East Lothian, however, the figure is just 68%. So again, I think credit to our catering staff, getting our young people healthy start in life. It's complementing the stuff we heard from Mary and Evelyn. So fairly standard fare, but just a real positive story to end this point on.
I wonder about the progress being made about the legal and the design engineering consultants business at New Buyers. Is that making progress?
Short answer, yes. It would be my intention to update Council probably in the first quarter of next financial year. Because it's going through the legal process and we're in public session, I would rather just give the Council assurance that we're aware of it, and I will report at the appropriate time.
Yeah, thanks. Just something on the fees and charges one on the sports and leisure. The fees and charges meeting, I think Mary unfortunately is away, but she's got a meeting on Friday. So I'm hopeful that will get us on the right track. Do you want to say anything on that, John, or the stage? I can appreciate that Mary's taken.
Yeah, what I will say, we all know the history of fees and charges. It came into my year, I was given the project, we managed to harmonise it with a few clarifications, let's say, to get forward. So, in the bigger picture, we're in a better place than where we were for ages before. However, there's been one or two unintended consequences, and Mary's doing the work with relevant colleagues. I'm also staying in the background and offering any support and assistance where issues come out, because we've got to recognise it's been a massive change that we've managed to put through. And there is one or two tensions, and I think I used in a previous committee here, there's a wee bit of noise in the system, but I think we keep hold of the bigger picture and just deal with it going forward. I think don't underestimate the decision you made as a council in harmonising fees and charges, and I'm partly delighted Mary's taking on, but we're also supporting her as colleagues.
Yeah. I mean, I think we always knew there was going to be challenges, and once we made that decision, but I think it's important we push ahead with this now, because I think especially with the financial climate that we're heading into, it's important we get this right. One way or another, and we know that there is a few issues with some of the organisations as regards what they're being asked to pay, but I think we have got to push ahead with it. And there's a hell of a lot gone into this. A lot of the staff have put work and invested time, so I appreciate what's happened in getting us to this stage. On that.
With that, we're happy to note the report. I thank you all for your attendance. See you in 40 minutes.
That's a meeting over, Chair. Being as this is a Midlothian Council performance report, I would like to congratulate the Heart of Midlothian for their wonderful performance last Saturday afternoon.
I think my group